I will not offer any practical tips today, but then again, decolonization is not about following rules. As anything, the practice of decolonization is a disturbance. It is not a comfortable experience, and I say it as a post-colonial subject. And to decolonize even oneself, not even thinking about institutions, is a tough, painful, and unpleasant practice. Instead, I will speak today in a format of creative storytelling, a dystopic narrative, and that is perhaps another angle of practice today. The title is Do Not Despair, a letter to a scholar whose homeland will be attacked by Russia next. Dear friend and fellow scholar, Russia invaded your homeland like it invaded mine in 2014. When Russia escalated its war to a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, I started my path as an early career scholar in 2022. I'm writing this letter to you about future epistemic trajectories that you will encounter in that never-ending your first year of the full-scale invasion. As the missiles will hit your hometown, you will wake up to the world that suddenly discovered your homeland. The academic field within which you always felt out of place will suddenly develop a sharp interest in your homeland. The institutions that previously turned you down and found your research interests too niche and not relevant to the wider region or bigger agenda will suddenly start inviting you to speak at the events platforming your homeland. You will embrace the steps. Finally, after so many years of marginalization, you will feel heard. And you will use your every opportunity to scream, to speak up. The war will color everything for you, and everything will become a matter of life or death, no less. Scholarship will become an existential affair. Remember, this is not the case for everyone, and they will gently remind you about it. They will mention objectivity, academic rigor. If you do not conform, behind your back they will say, too traumatized to be a rigorous scholar. They will try to allocate you to a safe place in the system. The safe place is a personal story. Sometimes they will need you to come and speak from that personal space on their terms, the local voices section. But you must always remind them that you are a scholar, that your pursuit is epistemic, because knowledge is not disembodied. Knowledge does not exist outside the passion of life. Use the space given to you to speak up, as this won't last long, as it won't always be yours. Academia will talk about decolonization. It will talk about it all the time. But with the exception of the few, it will not talk about your father, brothers, sisters, friends, those in cold trenches decolonizing through the occupation. That will not be epistemic enough to be discussed. You will make new colleagues, new friends, those who will stand by you, those who will push for change together with you. But good intentions of the few do not mean the realistic possibility of the redistribution of material resources, addressing the inequalities of knowledge production, the inequalities of survival, your survival, the survival of your people. Institutions will tell you, we cannot fundraise for the military, we cannot fundraise for anything, but we can organize a poetry evening. Okay, you will say, you will try to do both, to promote knowledge institutionally and to send donations personally. You will not be satisfied with the addition of authors to the curriculums. You will strive for action, strive to stop the violence on the ground. You will run in a dozen directions at once, trying to make sense, trying to survive. This will exhaust you. The changes in academia will seem exciting to you at first. All those events, statements, and even fellowships. There will be so many fellowships to support displaced scholars from your homeland. You have never seen so many scholars from your homeland in major institutions, in major conferences, even given keynotes. You will believe, here we are making change. Knowledge will never be the same. Your homeland will be running on adrenaline of resistance, and you too will not be able to afford despair. Despair means death. In that moment, do not forget that seeing scholars from your homeland in all the major institutions is a morbid privilege for which people of your homeland paid with their lives. And yes, it is a privilege, because the generosity of academia does not extend to all massacres in the world, not even to all massacres in your region. Remember how many other peoples were not granted this morbid spotlight. You will believe in the change with all your heart, like your homeland believes in its freedom. After all, academic institutions put so much effort into bringing you here, bringing others. See, these are visible results. Remember, you cannot afford despair. And you will become the change. You will organize seminars, public programs. You will believe you can make people understand. You just need to create a platform where they can learn. So you will organize. You will try to fill the gap. And you will also speak at other events incessantly. You will have the support of colleagues, those horrified by the violence, those questioning epistemic responsibility. But you will also notice that other colleagues are either silent or uncomfortable in your presence, or both. You remind them of the war, that ugly thing, that unpleasant disturbance. In your events, you will also notice the same questions, that one about Russophobia, that one about canceling Pushkin. You will wonder why people think these are the most pressing questions, when every day you wake up to the news about death, death, and death. Gradually, you will also notice that for your criticism of academic complicity, you will be framed as hysterical, as naive, as unable to see the positive change, the results of decolonization. That is how they will try to silence you, to disregard your critique. The war will go on, because Russia will not stop, because what Ukrainians, Syrians, Georgians, and others knew about it was true. Everyone and everything back home will become exhausted. You will become exhausted. You will need to find a way to sustain your epistemic struggle, to sustain supporting those living through the war. You will apply for jobs, but almost all tenure-track jobs will be either in Russian or at best in Russophone contexts. Institutions change slowly, you will be told. Be patient, you will be told. We are doing our best, you will be told. We brought you here, you will be told. You must look at the bright side, you will be told. Any academic event you will go on will be on decolonization. Everyone will be decolonizing. Yet the soldiers in trenches will continue to die daily. Cities of your friends will remain occupied. The jobs in non-Russian languages and culture will still be rare. It will become difficult to reconcile these two worlds, pretending that life goes on and knowing that the end of the world already happened. How can you go on living like that? How does everyone just carry on? While you despair, others will retrain to be experts on your homeland overnight. They will obtain grants and embark on research projects. This will be a new academic gold rush. You will be the new academic gold rush, not you as a scholar, you as an object of study. You will feel conflicted, you will try to articulate concern, but you will be framed as ungrateful, as uncooperative. Remember, they always make you believe the problem is you. The war will gradually become normalized. Russian occupation will become normalized. The way the occupation of Georgia became normalized. Does anyone even remember that today? People will start conducting studies on the territories occupied by Russia. Remember? Objectivity, academic rigor, nuance. Nothing personal, nothing political, just the highest standards of knowledge. Studies on the marginalization of Russian scholars, Russian scholarship will start to appear. The short-term fellowships will run out. One by one, colleagues from your homeland will be taken by darkness. The darkness of precarity, the darkness of survival, the darkness of the war. As the war will be normalized, as your people, your homeland will become exhausted, as survival will take up all your resources, they will put you in the corner, turn the page, decolonization over, return to the status quo until the next massacre.
I was born and raised in the south of Ukraine, in and around the city of Mykolaiv. I was born just before the collapse of the Soviet Union, and I'm almost the same age as Ukraine, slightly older. The first 7 years of my life I spent in a village on the outskirts of the city, but because my father is a military officer, we didn't live in a village house. We lived in those kind of apartment blocks for military officers. There were only 3. And that, actually, thinking back, defined a lot of things. But for one thing, is the 90s in the provincial southern Ukraine were really rough. So yeah, I grew up with kind of interesting circumstances, and lots of the things are unfortunately coming back in Ukraine. There's no electricity, no running water. Mykolaiv is one of the cities that. So actually, it's probably I was told, the only case known in history, but it's 500,000 people roughly. Now, of course, many people left because of the war, but since April 2022, it doesn't have potable water anywhere in a centralized system. There's a whole city, it just doesn't have potable water, so you have to carry it from stations. I'm going off track, but my childhood was a lot like that, like getting water from the water truck that would bring it rather than actually having water running from the tap. So it's kind of very weird to think of those kind of slow violence in a way repeating itself from the 90s and what's happening now in where I grew up. Everybody is like, it's super hot in the summer and the whole city is just carrying this massive like water buckets back and forth, and it really exhausts you. And like, I live on the 5th floor without an elevator, and walking back and forth, I really struggle to find energy to write. So it really impacts, like what can you make in terms of knowledge, what this exhaustion, this everyday life exhaustion for survival, I think really, it's very central to me, because I think a lot about the relation of knowledge to material reality, right? And what material reality, how it allows you to produce knowledge, what kind of knowledge, how it structures your knowledge. Anyway, but I lived there until 17, and then I got my first scholarship. I'm completely a product of different international scholarships. I studied for 2 years in international school, where I represented Ukraine. But it really like formed me as a person a lot, because it was a school in Italy, but we had people from more than 80 countries come in. It was super international, 180 people from 80-something countries. Pretty much everybody on scholarship, fully funded scholarship. And then I actually got a full scholarship to Ohio. So the States is a place where I got my BA, spent 4 years in a liberal arts college, and then went off. I just continued. My master's was in 3 countries. My PhD was in Scotland. So yeah, I'm kind of, where do you feel at home? So there's a question, of course, ever since.
Where do you live now?
I live just outside London, in a city called Reading. I don't know if the Reading market here has any relation to Reading, or is it called Reading market?
There's a Reading, Pennsylvania that might have been named after Reading,
that.
Yeah.
It's just, it's one of the satellite cities. And I'm there until March, and then I'm off to Bucharest for short fellowship, and then who knows. But I lived in Scotland previously for 5 years, and I really have grown into the Scottish land in many ways. So yeah.
Is there a place that you want to get to? Is there like a specific destination that you have, like in terms of either geography or career?
Well, I have like the place I really want to get to. It's more internal, on a kind of my own kind of personal thinking. And the one thing I really want to what really drives me and what I'm trying to do is really to be honest in my work, and be honest with oneself. And that is very difficult, because you hear a million other voices, but how do you really, and there's something that society doesn't teach us very often, but how do you really look internally and really understand what is exactly that you want to say, right? What is that you feel, and to have the courage to say that. I think it's very difficult. It's a very vulnerable place, and nobody else but you would know what is exactly that you want to say. But also, I really hope that my work, my writing, but also my visual work, is kind of uncompromised by external influences. Not in a way. I mean, of course, we are all it's in conversation and stuff, and I'm very much engaged with many different communities, and it shapes, right? But it's not compromised by funders, it's not compromised by what the market wants, what the institution wants, what people expect you, what even your friends expect you to say or do. And I think it's extremely, nobody teaches ever this stuff. And this is what's the kind of the place that I'm looking for, is how do I speak from that core. Yeah, so I thought, so you have 10 minutes, which is a huge pressure, and I also understand how many people are not given this opportunity, the spotlight, right? So what do you actually say? And I'm not only thinking about scholars who are not given, but also how many people in Ukraine don't have an opportunity to say something, right? They might not be scholars, but they think about knowledge and the way knowledge has a direct impact on their lives and the way their lives are structured. So it was a lot of pressure, and I had a first draft, which was okay, but and then, but I kept thinking, and I kept talking to some of the close friends, and this draft came to me, I sat down and I wrote it over 2 hours, as a kind of stream, and there was 95% was there, and then I just edited a bit, but it came after probably 5-7 days of complete torture of writing other drafts that were completely out, and this came in. Yeah, and I don't even know. Like actually, like the idea of a letter came to me after I was reading James Baldwin's letter to his nephew, and just really spoke to me. It was really powerful. And then just clicked. I was like, it should be a letter, right? And then it was just naturally like to whom I can address it. But yeah, I think there is power in that, like what other types of languages can offer us. And for me, it's also, of course, a process of, when I speak of decolonization of knowledge, is a lot of people who are not part of institutionalized, often Western or other forms like institutionalized education, do not express themselves through academic formats. But what kind of, like, they do carry knowledge, like storytelling is knowledge, our grandmothers carry knowledge. So how do we actually make that knowledge present? And, speaking today from that kind of format is also for me is like, you can make something that is knowledge without having the argumentative kind of linear plots that we are used to.
So were you, I guess you can just say next, but like, were you hoping for a certain response?
I mean, to be honest, I was terrified. I was completely terrified. And I was saying that I was really shaken. And until I'm really grateful to the friends who encouraged me, the few people with whom I shared. I'm especially grateful to Botakoska Simbekova. I'm here only because of her, actually. She was supposed to be on a panel, but she couldn't make it. And when she was invited on a panel, she asked if I could be invited. So in a way, she smuggled me to the conference, which I think is the greatest gesture. There's so much beauty in it. That's exactly how decolonization works or solidarity works. Like a friend pulls you through and says, like, I want this person to be there too. And so I'm only here because of her, and she also really supported me in like reading this. But I, to be honest, I was terrified. I don't think I thought of reaction, but I also think in my work, reaction is of course very important, and when people do find and read it, whatever text or something, and find something that resonates with them, it's super powerful, and I'm so grateful for people who, and I don't take it for granted when people come and tell you that. It's really, it touches me a lot. But I think through years I developed, like, for me it's the act of speaking up that is important, and even if it doesn't cause a reaction, at least like I was honest with myself and I said what I believe in. Sometimes it resonates, sometimes it doesn't, but I don't want the things I said or I've done in my work with a visual, or if they didn't resonate and gained the same amount of response, that they're less than the ones that did. Because it depends on context, it depends on so many things, you don't know, but as long as, if you believe in it strongly, and we know, like in context as well, here, but also in the kind of the context, I'm coming from and the historical background, speaking up is a tough thing to do, like a lot of stories lost. Like I think I just, like a couple of days ago, I posted about my great-grandmother, Darka, after whom I'm named, and she was the first person to tell me about Holodomor, the Great Famine, And I honestly thought, I was 12 years old when I interviewed her about her life, and she told me completely horrific stories, how people were trying to like attack and eat her, and like she heard them discussing how they would eat her, and like I really thought as a child, I thought that she's just inventing a bit, like just kind of telling me horror stories, until it was in school curriculums and we officially studied it, right, in school, because I was in that generation it came in the curriculum. But like now looking back, like I learned it from her, like people like this made it possible, the stories to come out, that they were talking about their experiences. So I think the act of speaking out is really, my point is never to attack people, right? And I think, my point is to attack the structures, right? Because we are all complicit in them in one way or another. And we are all part of structures in a way. You can't, like, that's the thing, I think in the modern world, you can't fully exit them, right? It's rather than it's not the point to attack, but it's a point to, and I think once again I didn't even think. I thought, of course, of addressing like this is my space to address in a way, to speak in the face of power. Like this is where the field comes together. and that was important, but more than that, and I think that's why the letter is addressed not to those who are running the structures, but actually to somebody who would be in my shoes if this is not stopped. So in a way it's written looking at the other with whom I could share the experience, but also looking at myself, right? And speaking of that experience. And I think for me it was more important to just speak from that place, because in a way, I mean, hopefully somebody else, but like I know that the experience that I carry, like that is my space to express it as well. And to express maybe things that others felt, share in a similar space. And I think it's important to be heard, to hear that, because a lot of that experience is structured by material inequalities. It's basic, like we talk about decolonization, but like it's basic, like can you get a visa to a country? Do you have money to like get yourself to this conference? Do you have institutional access to JSTOR? I don't now. I ran out of like my license for Word docs in summer. It was really pathetic at some point, because my contract with Oxford finished 2 days after they disconnected me. My Word doc was connected to my PhD in St. Andrews, which is like out for now second year. And at some point in summer, when I'm working on a monograph for a book, and I realized I don't have Word docs. How do you write a book if you don't have Word docs? I mean, these are pathetic questions, but this is exactly where decolonization begins. It's like, how do you make things accessible? I mean, I talked to colleagues in Ukraine who told me that they never had access to the papers in the field. They only learned about them from abstracts, because Ukrainian universities didn't provide, databases. Like, how do we tackle that? Like, this is decolonization, How do you actually, and some of the things can be done institutionally. We can think more about what people do have access to, And I'm very lucky, because I got this scholarship when I was 17, and I went abroad, and I got educated in US, I got to get in Britain, like all of that, also through funding, of course. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't stop. Like, how do actually, speaking of the people in the regions, how do we make that? Like, I think we talk a lot beautifully about collaboration, but is that collaboration equal, right? How does it actually, how to do it? That's and how to do more in terms of just practical things. And thinking also like long term, of course, like fellowships are great, but they are the fellowship ends in what? And we all know, like when you apply for jobs, people say like, oh, you have like 3-4 fellowships, so like you can't be employed by, you can't get a full-time job, right? So there's like, I'm also like very critical of these short-term solutions, as I said, because we get these people for 1 year or 2, and they try to do their best. They fully invest. I mean, I was in this space. I was in Oxford last year, and I was like running around completely like possessed by this idea to bring Ukrainian studies, because there's none in Oxford, right? And I found it very Russocentric. And so I was like organizing seminars, organizing reading groups, all of that, and that burns you out. And then the contract ends, and bye-bye, no Word doc, no access to the library, like good luck, Who are you? You're nobody. That's just the reality of it. Yeah. And it's very hard, of course. I mean, with all of that is like the internalized insecurities that, you project it as well. I mean, as an Eastern European, as a woman, like it's not an easy space to get kind of courage and confidence to believe that you are worth it if everybody tells you like, and if everybody also tells you you're only here because you're Ukrainian and there is this war, right? There's like, this tokenism, like you're here because, it's exactly the moment we need you, but to believe that, no, my work is actually worth it. It's not because it's Ukrainian and it is now, it's not because, whatever, but it's actually, this is really, really difficult. And I've seen many, many brilliant people in the field who are in the very early stages are discouraged. They don't believe in academia because how could you? Yeah. Like I submitted my final draft of PhD in December 2021. I just was switching my documents in the UK for the postdoctorate visa, and February I didn't go home for Christmas because my documents were reviewed, and then February comes. So it really, I came into like as an early career scholar, as a now doctor after defending my PhD, I came into the field exactly the moment Russia invades Ukraine, and for me, I mean, it was the case before, but I think this experience and the the whole first year, like I do not believe in knowledge which is not embodied. I don't believe in knowledge not being separated from life. It's really fundamental. I really strongly believe knowledge is existential, and I don't believe in that distance. That just doesn't exist for me. I think and I don't think it exists for anybody, because I think people wrote about it, like bell hooks wrote about it, but actually this doesn't exist. It's just we don't acknowledge the privileges, the other things, right? The kind of the structures that we are part in, and that the kind of this positionality which creates something that's like, oh, this is like academic or rigorous and scholarly, is actually like, it's not there. It's false. It's just it helps people to cover something that actually they're implicated in something, in a way. So and at some point, because it really like made me like, when I like, knowledge for me came as such a knowledge also, like, and I wrote about it, like knowledge as a kind of knowledge as suffering, knowledge as a wound, knowledge of that kind of heavy experience that you're carrying with it, and it was very difficult because I didn't feel there was space for it in university, right? I felt like exactly we want to study things, we want to study war, but how do we deal with people who are actually living through this experience? And universities really failed, I think, with a lot of people. And my experience, I was teaching then on like precarious, I had 5 precarious contracts, and I was teaching 8 different groups on 5 different modules. It was like complete, like, this is the first month of the war, and I really felt that the university didn't know how to deal with me. Not individually as like colleagues, right? So you would have, but that's exactly like, that's why I'm not addressing people individually, I'm addressing structures. Because what individuals can do, and I've been like through all my academic training, it's been individual people, like starting from my PhD supervisors, to people in department. I was in a fantastic department at the University of St. Andrews, and they were always pulling me through individually, which is a lot, and they've done a lot. But when the structure fails you, there's very little you can do even as individuals, right? And I felt like that the university as a structure wasn't there for me. And I only, like, in that first month pulled through because of individual effort, which also those people, of course, carry on their shoulders as part of, goodwill. There should be a structure that is supposed to aid you there. And at that moment I was like, well, we talk about all the stuff, it's cool, but actually we don't want it here. This is somewhere there, but here is no, this is not, this is, let's read about the war. That is interesting. So for me really became like knowledge is something else, I think, these days. This is exactly how we're prevented from doing things. That we are told we are too idealistic. This is this is too much. You have to go like slowly. You have to. But I think like I really want to encourage people to believe in change, and they can make the change. That is so important in a way, not to be not idealistic. Like not. It's very important to keep being idealistic sometimes, right? Because we are always told that like no, like. Calm down, be patient, like this is not possible right now. But we all have more power than we think, and that's something I realized, like when the full-scale invasion started. Obviously, like all of us felt like rather helpless in many ways, but it was like, I got my doctor status, and I still had the University of St. Andrews, which is the oldest and like top university in Scotland, one of the top universities in the UK. And I was like, wow, that gives me power to speak to the press. That gives me power to write opinion pieces. So like one of the pieces I wrote on like feminism and weapons with my friend Irina Zmurueva. We wrote a piece on like why is feminist lobby for weapons. It's not part of my research, but I was like, I'm a doctor, I'm in this Scottish university, and that means like people might take me a little bit more seriously, right? And I can use my title to say what my mom cannot say, or what my dad cannot say, like as simple like that. And I think we all, we are not, academia is a powerful structure in the end, and we all have quite a lot of power to change, both the structures we are in, whether like departments and stuff, or speaking of the bigger world. So I think just like be idealistic and like push for it. Like don't listen to the people who tell you this is not possible.